You're live on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. This is Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Ayanda Nyathi. It's great to have you with us. So, around this time of the day, we always help you set up your day by giving you an idea of what the news cycle is looking like. We'll just get to that in just a moment. But first, we thought we should bring this to you at this point. We've gotten into, we can call it a tradition, hopefully by now, where we try to get your insights on some of the more contentious issues around COVID-19. And today, we've posed yet another question to you on our Twitter poll. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, as you know, is looking for funds to plug the revenue hole caused by COVID-19 in South Africa. There's a lot of consideration to be made around this, including trying to balance the political trade-offs that come with whatever option he takes. So we're asking you this morning, where do you think he can get that money? Or perhaps where do you think he should sort of try and get that money? So the first option is the option of trying to sell SOEs. He's already said no to a 10 billion rand bailout for SAA, so perhaps that's a sign of things to come. Second option, approach the IMF and the World Bank. We know there's a lot to think about there because of the, fiscal reforms that will be required. And I imagine not many of you will be in favor of the third option, which is to increase taxes. But it's certainly something that's also on the cards. Head on over to twitter.com/Newzroom405. Otherwise, just find us there and have your say. We'll certainly bring you those outcomes in just a moment towards the end of the show. You can also just respond to that tweet with some of your sentiments around that issue. Use, of course, the hashtag NewsFeedAM. All right, so let's bring you back home now. The news cycle is still, moving quite rapidly. Major developments on the global front, and those, of course, are mirrored by some of the machinations here back at home. Zain Semaar is the managing editor here in Newzroom Afrika. As you know, he always helps us make sense of some of these big movements. Zain, always great having you with us. How are we going about the story today?
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Ayanda. So this morning we obviously continue to bring you all the news, the views, the updates from government efforts, but we also endeavor to bring you all the human interest stories as they unfold during this period of lockdown. So this morning our reporter Itakani Magwedze is out at the Bait Bridge, a border post. We've seen allegations and we've seen pictures of the fences being broken down and movement across that border. He's also going to be looking around the Giyani area where some rural areas have still not received water. So we'll bring you an update on that struggle in Giyani. Linda Mnisi this morning will be going back to Alex, where we'll be taking up the story of the SANDF. So this morning we are accompanying the SANDF along with a patrol, looking at their jobs through their eyes almost. This following a lot of complaints and allegations of SANDF and police abuse during this time of coronavirus. Right. So just having a different perspective and then also bringing you up to date with all the latest complaints and exactly what's being done. Like in the case of police people, for instance, we know we can go to IPID. What's the case with army personnel? Where do you go and complain? What's the legal process? Is there a military court in sitting? Those are the kind of details that Linda will hopefully be bringing us today.
Right, and Alex is significant, of course, because sadly we had that fatality that allegedly happened at the hands of SANDF members. I think it was just about a week or two ago.
Yes.
I am interested to find out how the community is responding to that kind of presence in the wake of, that kind of incident. So we'll touch base with Linda in just a moment. I understand he's already standing by.
Sure. In Northwest, right, Zintle Kanyani is continuing to bring us the story of government's continued mass screening and testing. Today they'll be around the area in Klabani, Geelhout and Yizo in the Northwest area. Zintle is covering that story for us. In Cape Town, the most important development happening yesterday. Atem Tongana doing quite well, covering the late night or the late afternoon outbreaks of looting and protests in a lot of Western Cape suburbs that we've seen yesterday, stretching from Mitchells Plain to Goodwood to Gatesville. People complaining about food parcels, bringing into sharp focus, obviously, the issue of food and food security and where those things are meant to go. As you remember, the food, a lot of people calling for the food school feeding programs to come back, because before COVID-19 those were one of the instances where school kids got a meal from sometimes the only meal that they had received for the day.
Right, absolutely. And, sadly, the issue around food parcels has also played out in Alexandra. Let's take you there now before we go to the newspapers. You'll know, as Zain just mentioned, the SANDF has recently landed in hot water for alleged brutality amid the enforcement of the lockdown regulations. Now, this has raised questions on how lockdown rules should be properly enforced. Today, our Ayanda Nyathi is going to be joining soldiers on patrols throughout the township of Alexandra to witness a day of enforcing these lockdown regulations. Take you to Linda, who joins us now live from the township. So, Linda, it's still the early hours of the morning. I imagine, of course, there's likely to be a whole lot more movement as the sun touches the top of the skies. Help us sort of locate this at this point, right? Why is it important for us to be in Alex and monitor this from that perspective?
Well, indeed, Ayanda, today we'll get to experience a day in the life of the SANDF, who've been, monitoring the situation here in Alexandra. They've been patrolling since the announcement of that lockdown, and like you mentioned there, the way in which these rules have been enforced have come under question, and how the SANDF has gone about it has really brought about questions on how they really should, be enforced. We understand that Alexandra is one of the communities that has been described as densely populated, and some of the challenges that have come from them is the issue of complying to the lockdown regulations. Now, how do you enforce it is one of the questions that really needs to, clear answers. And what do we then do, to avoid arrests at this particular point? You'll understand that the SANDF, Ayanda, are not really people that deal with public order policing. That is a prerogative of the police. So we get to really ask some of those tough questions. I mean, in light of that alleged murder at the hands of, allegedly at the hands of the SANDF, there's been heavy criticism around that, because then what happens if the right to life, which is guaranteed even in a worst case scenario like a state of emergency, what happens when that right to life is taken away? And given the fact that some of the civil liberties have been clamped down during this time, Ayanda.
Absolutely. And I imagine, of course, part of the evaluations, Linda, today will also be to try and see how community members respond to the SANDF in the wake of that alleged murder.
Indeed, and over the past few weeks we've been here in Alexandra, and the SANDF, have raised issues around some of the, educational measures that government has taken in Alexandra. It seems from their point of view, some, community members don't really understand what it means to be on lockdown and what they should be then doing. Right now, what I'm seeing behind the cameras, in fact, is them actually making their way into the Alexandra Mall, which is where they'll be assembling before, undertaking that particular patrol. But we understand that education is one of the most important issues, Ayanda, for the residents to know. But in case of, violating those lockdown regulations and how this, the enforcement is done, what are some of the consequence measures that are going to be taken or are being taken against them? We understand that from the police point of view, IPID is one that investigates such matters. But what happens in the case of the military? We'll understand that we are in uncharted waters, and this is an opportunity really for South Africans to get to learn around the issues of the military and how they go about, their business on a day-to-day basis, particularly under this lockdown. The military ombuds has confirmed previously that they are investigating a number of cases of alleged brutality at the hands of the SANDF. So what measures will be taken? What powers do they have in administering these consequences? Those are some of the things, Ayanda, that we'll get to find out today.
Absolutely. We'll let you get on with that then, Linda. Of course, we'll be touching base with you throughout the course of the morning as you continue monitoring the story for us. Ayanda Nyathi is live to us from Alexandra Township. Thank you very much indeed. So, all right, let's very quickly then take you through the newspapers this morning to give you a sense of what else is worth tracking. I'll kick us off with the business day. As expected, they're reflecting on the developments from yesterday. The Reserve Bank Governor Lesisha Kganyapa slashing the repo rate by 100 basis points, also saying no to printing money, which is, I guess, called like direct funding, if you like. And that's only because there's a whole lot of implications for that, including possible inflation. On page 6, though, a very interesting development on the business day is a cartoon of U.S. President Donald Trump with what appears to be a figure of the coronavirus sort of kind of smashing into his face. Yeah. And there are various interpretations of it, but let me just give you the background of why this is important today. That's because U.S. President Donald Trump has just essentially pulled funding from the World Health Organization. It's an astounding move at this time of the pandemic. He's accusing the body of being China-centric. I mean, he's essentially said that the UN body has tried to cover up the coronavirus, giving no substantiation at all. And I guess if this is anything to go by, it appears that the coronavirus is, he was so unprepared for it that it's a slap in the face for him, to everything that he's been able to do. And as expected, the world is groaning with criticism at this hour because of a move like this. And it reveals a whole lot, not only about the man, but certainly the country itself.
Yes. I think President Donald Trump, the U.S. president, consistently being out of touch. Yeah. If I can call it that, consistently being out of touch with not only the science around the pandemic, but also out of touch with what the Americans are feeling and what's happening on the ground. And it is clear that whenever he addresses a news briefing, that sense comes across more than anything else. Just to follow on the story of that, in the Citizen today, we have locked but not loaded is how they're choosing to go with a story of one of the ripple effects of government printers not being able to print new licenses or new money. So the problem that the South African private or private security owners industry are mentioning is that they are failing to renew the license of the private security contractors. So, and you'll know in South Africa, private security amounts for more than the police budget. Yeah. So, and it accounts for a large section of the population's security also. So another interesting development as a result and implications of these lockdown regulations.
Absolutely. Speaking about financial issues, the Star this morning reflecting on the EFF's calls for there to be some kind of bank relief for people who have loans within the banks. EFF calls on banks to excuse defaulters is the headline that they're using. Again, echoing sentiments that we've heard before, really, which is calls for certain banks to go easy on over-indebted South Africans who, for very many reasons, obviously aren't able to pay some of their debt.
Quite interestingly, the same political party on page 3 of the Sowetan talking about how there seems to be a little bit of a revolt from EFF councillors to their leaders' proposal that a 33% pay cut in the salary be given to the Solidarity Fund.
It
seems as if some councillors in Limpopo are saying, listen, if you take this money from us, what we are left with is not enough. So we're not able to do this, and besides, when you announce this, you didn't consult us. So a lot of politicking also happening around there. Another one that I'd just like to mention that's not in the newspapers is some kind of media and social media outrage at the Democratic Alliance manufacturing masks with their party branding on.
A lot to be said about that. But we'll leave it there at least for now. Thank you very much. As always, a pleasure being in conversation with you. Zain Semaar is the managing editor here at Newzroom Afrika. So in just a moment, we'll discuss the support of business for government's effort to combat the impact of COVID-19 on health, the economy and labor with the Business for South Africa's Martin Kingston. Details in just a moment. Do stay with us.